On today's episode, I'm joined by a psychologist from Johns Hopkins University who appears in the upcoming documentary #Untruth. And he explains the evolutionary reasons why humans are constantly drawn in to ruthless authoritarian movements, but also how our primate ancestors shared quite a bit in common with those who were brainwashed in 1930s Nazi Germany. You guys are going to want to buckle up for this one, so without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. John Gartner, and this is Uncovering the Truth. John, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's just get right into it. This has been something that's on my mind because I recently got into an argument with somebody about Adolf Hitler. This was in my class on fascism. And she said that it didn't matter if Adolf Hitler came to power or not, because the anti-Semitism was already dormant. Anybody could have done what he did and it would have ended in the same result. And I said that's preposterous. Only Hitler had whatever it took to rile him up. So I just wanted to throw that to you. What is it about authoritarian figures like Hitler that makes him stand out from versus someone like me just saying whatever Hitler said and it not working, right?
These demagogues are very charismatic, and they're able to arouse a great deal of emotion and also to control it. So they're able to, I think actually this goes back to some very primitive programming. If you don't mind, I'm just going to jump back a few million years.
Yes. Jump.
If you observe chimpanzees, Jane Goodall spent so much time with the chimpanzees, and we got these wonderful footage of them being so human and compassionate and loving and connecting with Jane Goodall. They share 98% of our DNA. And we used to think that humans were the only animal that committed murder. But what happened is after Jane Goodall got a little older, that colony grew so big that they split into two colonies. So everything Jane Goodall observed was within group behavior. So, the males would compete for dominance. They beat their chest and they throw dirt up in the air and hurl heavy boulders into the river to try to show their virility, right? And it was a competition, but they call it display behavior because no one actually gets hurt in these displays of male virility, for competing for dominance. But once the group split in half, one charismatic sort of dominant male starts whipping the other males into a frenzy, really literally slapping them and getting them excited. And then he leads them single file to the next troop, and they systematically murder the males of the other troop one at a time. And these are these kind little animals who are actually very frightened, easily frightened. They're not very aggressive, except in this context, okay? And so what happens is they absorb that troop's territory and their females. And so the group that had the charismatic leader that led them in battle, in an aggressive, conquering battle against this other innocent troop, is the one whose DNA went on.
Wow. So essentially though, some of the alpha males, right? These are the alpha males that have the charisma, and some of them even I know commit infanticide, which is objectively evil, but maybe they have their reasons for it. But so you're suggesting that our gene pool is perhaps split off into what I guess you could call good versus evil, and both of them are equally as successful in surviving and carrying on the...
Well, in a way, actually, I'm saying the evil is more successful because which troop got to pass their DNA on? The one that had an aggressive conqueror who mobilized them to attack the other village. And if you look at human history, there's never been a time without war. Okay. And so what actually has happened over time is we've started to collect into larger and larger groups. So if you read that book, Sapiens, for thousands of years, we just lived in little groups of 20 people around a fire, and we did that for 1 million years, and then all of a sudden there was some kind of cognitive revolution. We don't know how it happened. Some people even think it might've been psychedelics that sort of expanded people's consciousness, the stone date theory, which is starting to seem more and more plausible to me as I do more research in this area. But then they could think in larger concepts. So it wasn't just our little group of 20 people around the fire, it's the valley people. We're the valley people. Now they could think more abstractly against the mountain people. And so there came to be a capacity to see themselves conceptually in larger and larger groups. And those groups would still have these competitions, these wars, these fights for dominance. But because they were able to work collectively as larger groups, that was one theory as to how they actually sort of displaced the Neanderthal. Because the Neanderthal didn't have that kind of organization. But if you can mobilize, 100 or 1,000 people, right, to defend one position, then you're going to overrun this more, primitive enemy. And so in a way, it's in us, it's in our human nature, but these demagogues are able to tap it in a destructive way. And what they're able to do is actually to tear apart a society that has become more cohesive. It's devolution. When they break apart, let's say, Yugoslavia, when Milosevic takes a Yugoslavia and turns it into Serbs versus Croats, well, Serbs and Croats have been living peacefully in Yugoslavia for a long time. But he's able to, but there's a stress fracture there, right? There's still differences. What he's able to do is say, no, we're not one country, okay? They're the enemy and they're trying to destroy our country. So now what was within group behavior, we're all Yugoslavians, now becomes between group behavior. They're the other troop and they're gonna come and kill us unless you give me power to kill them first. Okay, so you arouse that fundamental simian protection, survival mechanism, and that's why they're able to forgive Donald Trump, I believe, all of his sins. It's not that they don't know he's a liar. It's not that they don't know he's a bad person. I think they actually know he's a bad person. Yeah. But the point is that if you can put someone in the mental condition where they feel like their survival is threatened, and either you get behind the big guy, right, and we fight it out, or they're going to wipe us out, suddenly that forgives a multitude of sins, okay? And that's what they're able to mobilize. This is my theory. That's what they're able to mobilize in terms of human psychology.
Wow, well, that is the most, so then based off of that, is this dormant in like all of us? Perhaps like, could someone like you or someone like me be drawn to another authoritarian figure, maybe who's smarter and more sophisticated than Donald Trump, who taps into a different, but it would have to be pitting us against the other, right? That's a common element.
Right, exactly. There has to be an other. There has to be an other. And what the demagogues do is the other isn't the Russians, it's your neighbor, it's the Jews, it's the guy across the street, okay? Suddenly the other is someone who used to be part of us. But now psychologically, but there might be some prejudice, like, yeah, they're part of us, but not part of us, or, they're part of us, but we don't really like them. I wouldn't want my daughter to marry one, but they're okay. But
yes.
And now it's more like, no, they're going to kill us if we don't get behind the big guy. That's what he's able to mobilize. And so this whole sense of paranoia, right? The malignant narcissist. So in Unfit, we diagnosed Trump as being a malignant narcissist. And that, for the people who didn't watch the film, that's a combination of these 4 personality traits. It's a combination that was discovered by Erich Fromm, who escaped the Nazis in his attempt to understand the personality type of a Hitler or a Mussolini. And he's the one that developed this term, malignant narcissism. And it has these 4 components: narcissism, obviously, to be sure, but also paranoia. The feeling that he's under attack, right, by all kinds of bad people, bad minority groups, immigrants, rhinos, right? Suddenly we're under attack by all these bad people. And so he has to elicit that paranoid or augment or verify that paranoia in the subjects, because the paranoia is part of it. You have to be under threat, okay, to basically go along with the demagogue. And so that's part of what he's able to create. The third component is antisocial personality disorder. In other words, he's a psychopath. So he lies, he cheats, he steals, he has no remorse, he has no guilt. So these people are monsters. So they have absolutely no moral code. And the fourth component is sadism. It's a very important component. It's not just they want to win, they want to hurt people. They want to crush them. They want to destroy them. They want to humiliate them. How Donald Trump is so obsessed with getting back at his enemies and sort of enjoying their suffering. I had the misfortune of actually editing a book about his tweets. This was like 4 years ago, and I had to read thousands of his tweets. And it's just the number of tweets that were just hatred and humiliation. And, it's like, how could somebody spend 20 times a day, just talking about how much they want to humiliate other people? It's driven. I also think he's kind of manic, hypomanic, actually. So all of these negative personality traits are then heightened through the hypomanic energy. But the point is with that hypomanic energy, he's also activating something in the followers.
Yes. So I've seen you've referred to them as sleeper cells, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That only a demagogue can activate like him. So is he activating these sorts of psychological disorders within his followers?
Yes.
And I guess that it worked. I just don't understand to me how, because why are they drawn to a malignant narcissist sadist? And yet we saw it manifest on January 6th. Sadistic people, they were maniacally laughing as they were plowing through the doors, and they planned on executing members of these are ordinary citizens who probably some of them just worked at supermarkets the year before, and now they're involved in a terrorist attack. So that's a psychological takeover that he's done on these people.
Yes, it is. And when I interviewed one of the scientists who observed the chimpanzees, he said, you have to understand, chimpanzees are very timid animals. Because they're really chickens, you know what I mean? They're not brave or aggressive animals by any means. But when they're in one of these killing frenzies, they feel invulnerable. You can scream at them or threaten them, and they're just totally in the zone. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this is what that charismatic leader is able to do. He's able to look. Imagine a situation. Imagine we're in some kind of zombie apocalypse, right? Okay, and so you and I are now we're just trying to survive, The Walking Dead, right? Mm-hmm. And some leader emerges, right? Some powerful alpha male who's like a bully, and he's sort of just taking over. Maybe he killed the guy who was ahead of him before, and now he's just taking over. And but there's another troop, right? There's another group of psychopaths that want to kill us and eat us or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so this guy's a complete schmuck, okay? But he's telling us that he's going to protect us from those other bad people, okay? At that point, it's like, look, who cares if he's a jerk, right? I mean,
let's use him. Let's use him. Yeah, we want him on our team, right? But so these people these Trump supporters, they are getting something from Donald Trump. That, it would be foolish for me to say, he's just suckering them. He's conning them, which he is financially speaking, but right. and he's not passing any policies that really are favorable for them. But he's offering them some emotional, psychological, filling some void that someone like Joe Biden or some normal politician cannot fill. And I guess that just ties into my my next sort of question is, like you said about his tweets, mm-hmm. How could he spend so much time lying? Well, he's still doing it on Truth Social every day. And one of the reasons I liked your Unfit documentary is because you guys you made the warning, do not underestimate him. Don't call him stupid. He is not a circus clown. He's not a buffoon. This is a very intentional demagogue who is mobilizing his supporters to overthrow, essentially, and it was proven true, to overthrow and end American democracy. So he's doing it again, and they're still very drawn to him. So how does this resolve? Either does it resolve in, quote, civil war? Does it resolve in when Donald Trump perhaps dies of an illness down the line, or result in prison or suicide? I mean, how does this end?
Yeah.
And it's a giant question. Nobody knows the answer to this.
Well, I think there is an answer to how it ends, which is we have to win. Think about World War II, right?
Yep.
We had to have unconditional surrender before we could have the Marshall Plan. Same thing with the Civil War, right? There had to be Appomattox for there to be healing. We must crush them. I mean, I'm serious. We must crush them at the ballot box, crush them in the courts. They need to be, hauled off in leg irons, right? They need to be shamed. They need to be held up as an example of unpatriotic criminality. Mm-hmm. In other words, it has to be a kind of Nuremberg, sort of purge, or a Truth and Reconciliation Committee purge. Society has to face everything that was destructive and evil and corrupt about this, and there have to be consequences. So we really have to win, and we have to win big, and we have to win hard. We have to crush this rebellion, and there's no other way. This is a cage match, 2 enter, 1 leaves. That's it.
Yeah. So basically it's a zero-sum game at this point. There's just no, and will a moment of arrest, let's say there's prosecutions for some of these politicians, as a psychologist, I've always thought, does it take some sort of near-death experience or some traumatic event to perhaps pull some of these people out? They're not going to become Democrats after, they'll maybe withdraw from politics, but is there some sort of event like that? Will that trigger perhaps any psychological effect within the Trump supporters?
Well, look, I mean, after World War II, the Germans went back to being nice people, or regular people, and now I think they're probably among the most, they're the ones that are leading the world in democracy, them and the French, So the thing is that when the fever breaks, right? When the demagogue leader is, disgraced or killed or replaced or, shamed or, but basically extruded from the body politic, okay, then these other people calm down. They calm down and they sort of have to now kind of integrate into the new society. So it doesn't matter, you take off your Nazi uniform and that's it. You go back to fixing cars and being a regular person.
Yeah, or at least a racist in private, as opposed to.
Okay, well, fine. That's where it's meant to be kept in private. We don't need it in public.
Right, because I'll tell you something else that I've noticed, and I'm just so fascinated by their psychology, I guess, of these sort of, I guess, would you call them brainwashed people, that they feel okay, it's fair to call them. They feel immune to the rule of law as well. Like now, I've noticed, terrorist groups, neo-Nazis, Confederates are making regular appearances in public when these used to be like clandestine groups, right? They used to be cognitively aware that we have to remain hidden, but now they feel emboldened by this authoritarian figure. So
part of what they're identifying with is his narcissism, so they're also feeling entitled now to be dominant and aggressive. Another thing that came out of World War II was this study of what they called the authoritarian personality. They asked the question, who became a Nazi? Who became an enthusiastic Nazi? Was there a personality type? And there was actually, and it has a lot of these qualities of the malignant narcissist that we've been talking about in the people who are enthusiastic Nazis, but also there is a certain feeling of entitlement to hurt and be aggressive towards people who don't conform to the norms of society. And also a kind of racial entitlement, to be superior, to be dominant, okay? And I think that has run through the white race quite a bit. Right, as we see, whether it's the Spanish landing in, South America and, enslaving all the Indians. Every time the white men land, they feel entitled to rule. Okay, right. And so now that entitlement is being challenged, and it feels existential. I think that is definitely part of it. That the white male has been dominant now for centuries. Okay, and that dominance is being threatened, and so all these people share that feeling that dominance is being threatened, but they're entitled to enforce it. I think that's a very important component.
Wow. And so if they feel entitled, does it matter if if it's a real threat or a perceived threat? For instance, I know they're the new talking point amongst Fox News, and I monitor the far right networks closely because I'm interested in their what's driving them, right? And so
thank you for doing that for the rest of us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm doing God's work here.
You are in hell.
In hell, yeah. So holding on to my sanity, by the way. The new talking point though is that birth rates amongst white birth rates are on the decline, and that the white race is going to become the minority. I want to say in 2050 in America. Which, again, these are giant conspiracies, and that the Great Replacement theory that they're going to replace the white electorate with third world voters. Well, globalist liberals. Right. So that's another anti-Semitic conspiracy. Is that enough? Is that enough? All that is that perceived threat.
Yes. I think the demographic cliff is enough. actually. I think ultimately that is actually the real underlying precipitant. There was a great article in the Atlantic, and I wish I could remember who wrote it, but his point was, when you look at the Republicans had a chance to become a big tent party, right? They did that autopsy after McCain lost, and they said, look, we've got to appeal more to minorities, blah, blah, blah. But they went the other way, right? Instead, they doubled down on being the white identity politics, the white power party, right? Yeah. And the thing is that what they realized is they did the math. They did the same math that you're doing, and realizing by 2050 or whatever the year is, we're going to be in the minority. And so if we're going to be in the minority in a democracy, we're going to lose power. So we have two choices. Either we can accept losing power because we're now going to be a racial minority, or we can destroy democracy and take power. That's why it's essential for them to destroy democracy, and to destroy democracy now, okay? While they still have some dominance, right? Because otherwise they will be in the minority and lose that dominance to which they feel entitled and to which they feel is an existential threat.
Forever. And so they are in a constant state of revolution, sort of, as the leaders like to keep them in that state of revolution.
Right.
Now, with that logic in mind, then would you say that, because I'm of the belief, this is my personal political opinion, that Donald Trump is the only person who can rile these people up. I see Ron DeSantis as he just doesn't have it for me. They don't care about him. They'll vote for him maybe, but Donald Trump is the only man with this charismatic authority, I think, as you put it, that can do this. I'm just, would you agree with that statement, or any politicians are able to embody him now and it'll work?
Well, I agree and I don't agree. I agree partially. I do agree that he's sort of unique in his charisma. I mean, not that aren't charismatic leaders, but these Trump lights that are trying to be Trump wannabes don't have the charisma, so it falls kind of flat and sort of pathetic. That said, this gets back to your question about, are these people brainwashed, and all the good work that you're doing in terms of following right-wing media. One of the themes of Untruth, that really is, I think, one of the main themes, or maybe the main theme, is brainwashing. That what the Republicans now have done in collaboration, in collusion with the Russians, is develop propaganda techniques that work. So that now, between Fox News and Facebook and micro-targeting on other kinds of social media, there is absolutely nothing they cannot make their followers believe. I want to say that again. I think there is absolutely nothing that they cannot make their followers. If you want to say Mike Pence is actually a robot from Venezuela, that came from Hunter Biden's laptop, just say it enough times on Fox News and it'll start showing up on Twitter, and people will start validating it. And then Republican politicians will start saying it, and then and then after a while, that if you just hear something 20 times, you begin to think it's true. The principles of brainwashing are really so simple. My mom used to work in advertising, so my first job when I was a kid in college was something where in market research I was a coder. So we would read these questionnaires, right, and they would ask someone. I remember this one in particular, but so significant. They gave them Tropicana orange juice. They said, "So tell me, how does it taste?" This is an open-ended question, not check a box. Just they could say anything they wanted. Well, you know what the most frequent comment was? It tastes like fresh squeezed. Now look. There's simply no way, okay? The Tropicana orange juice tastes anything like fresh squeezed, right? It just doesn't. It just doesn't, right? I mean, come on. I mean, what are you going to believe? Their advertising campaign or your lying tongue? Well, apparently the answer is the advertising campaign, because that was Tropicana. When I was a kid, you couldn't flip through the advertisements, okay? There was we didn't have remote controls, we didn't have VCRs, okay? We had 3 channels in black and white, and you watched the damn ads, okay? So you heard hundreds and hundreds of times, Tropicana tastes more like fresh squeezed. Tropicana tastes more. So you just hear them say it, and after a while, you believe it. Well, it's like the ash experiment, which we talked about in Unfit. Famous experiment, also inspired by World War II, by the way. I'll repeat what it is for the audience who may not know.
I think we'd love to hear that.
So the ash experiment is really one of the more brilliant experiments in psychology. One of the things that they asked after World War II was exactly the question you're asking. How could you convince all these people to believe something so crazy, right? How does that happen? These people were, civilized, cultured, educated, they weren't crazy, and the answer is that the social pressure really shapes our perception of even the most basic forms of reality. What they did was they had people come into a room at the basement at Yale University, right, and showed them 3 lines. 2 lines were identical in size, and one was obviously larger. And they said, which one is larger than the others? And the subjects get it right 100% of the time. No one ever gets it wrong. Okay. Now they redo the experiment. There's 2 people that the student thinks are other students, right? But actually they work for the experimenter. And so they go, so which line is longer? And the other 2, oh, well, it's this one over here, obviously. And the guy kind of looks around like, really?
They pick the smaller one, right? They pick on purpose.
They pick the smaller one, right, on purpose. And something like 30% of the people change their answer.
Wow. So it's all about the herd mentality, the group mob mentality is kind of tied into that.
Absolutely.
So
herd stupidity instead of herd immunity.
Yeah. So that's what the Republican Party has mastered to a T.
Right. To a T.
Hunter Biden, election fraud, election fraud.
Exactly.
And then this is what I sort of embodied or tried to, I guess, translate. I was like, I wish the Democrats would start repeating their accomplishments or the truth over and over. Would that have the same effect, or is there something about
yes like many Democrats, I despair over the Democratic incompetence politically, the political malpractice. All you had to do was say 100 times a day, the Republicans are Russians. The Republicans are Russians. The Republicans are Russians.
Yes.
Just keep saying it until you just beat people over the head with it, till you just beat their brains out with it.
They should, but unfortunately, the Fox News is now. I hear Fox News is willing to cross lines, moral, ethic lines that the other news networks aren't. But but that emboldens the authoritarian movement.
Yes,
it does. So, and you can't get these people off. I just saw a truck the other day. Literally, I'm in Santa Monica, and there was a giant white pickup truck on the back. It said, "I despise the fake liberal media." Like, wow, this is an epidemic that is.
Sure.
There's no going back from any of this, and it comes down to the repetition of the lie, and that's Adolf.
So if they can, right, exactly. So if they can repeat the lie, tastes like fresh squeezed, this line is longer, and the election was stolen, people go, okay, 30% of people just go along with it. It works. And you're right. I don't understand why the Democrats aren't equally monotonous about pounding forth the truth. If they can repeat lies over and over and over again till people believe them, why can't we repeat the truth over and over and over again till people believe it? I just don't get it.
I don't get it either, but that's what I love about, so that's sort of this is the subject of the new film you're appearing in called Untruth. It's exactly it. Could you talk just to some of, what your involvement with that film is, and perhaps some of the themes that we're going to explore throughout that, and maybe why it's so important for people to watch it, because the last one had a major impact on the election. And so here we are again. We need to hear more about this.
Well, I'm not sure how big an impact it'll have, because obviously the people who need to see it the most are the ones who are in the, Sun Myung Moon concentration, cult camp. But I think actually what's really important is we're letting our pockets get picked. Okay, by not attending to these methods that they're using for propaganda. Let me give you an example. Okay, something that I made a huge mission about was trying to stop Elon Musk from buying Twitter. I mean, I practically hurled myself in front of a train and handcuffed myself to the Twitter building. I mean, just 5 times a day I was just hammering it, because I honestly believed if Elon Musk had succeeded in buying Twitter, that would have been the ball game. It literally would have been over. And when I say this, it sounds hysterical. It's not about how many dollars per share. If you read in the mainstream media, it was like, oh, he has this many dollars per share, and his Tesla stock is down, and he's getting outside investors. Like, this is not a financial deal.
Yeah,
this is what shapes the reality, the mental reality of the deciders in our culture. Okay, I hate to make Twitter sound so important when in one sense it's so ridiculous, but if you can be convinced by a Tropicana ad, you can be convinced by Twitter or Facebook. Okay, and so the point is that if we let someone who is clearly a right-wing fanatic get control of Twitter, put Trump back on Twitter, which he threatened to do, giving him that megaphone, and also stop stop basically taking misinformation off of Twitter. In the name of free speech, basically we were going to be inundated with toxic waste. Okay, we were going to be inundated with misinformation from the Republicans and Russia. Okay, in the interest of free speech, it's like, in the interest of free speech, should we put cyanide in the in the drinking water? I mean, this is going to be poisoning mentally poisoning the culture. And so Biden made a huge mistake by being passive about this. Big surprise. If I were Biden, I would have stopped that deal as a threat to national security. I would have gotten the SEC, the FEC, I would have gotten every agency to wrap them up in so much red tape and evaluation and comment periods that it would have been 2032 before they could ink that deal. Because you can't give the Republicans Twitter. Are you insane? Are you crazy? That's the end.
It's because I believe they're, once again, underestimating what the Republicans are willing to do, or rather what they envision for this country. Like you said, they were spreading not only misinformation about elections, but medical disinformation that could lead to death. And it did. It led to million deaths in America. And so
talk about the power of disinformation. If you can convince people a pandemic that is killing millions of people, including people is not real, and an election that was not stolen, and there's no evidence that it was.
Yeah.
I mean, what can't you convince them of? What if you can convince them of those two things? I mean, I know people who had relatives die of COVID who didn't believe in it. I mean,
I saw there was a man on his deathbed who said, "If I die, it's my time." It's like, it's so deep, the misinformation, and so that it's very hard to disseminate from the truth. And even to the point of people no longer even believing truth to be truth.
But that's the emergency. And that's where our government is really failing us, frankly, because they should be regulating social media tightly. Okay. Yes. We should bring the Fairness Act back. There used to be an act called the Fairness Act, which meant that if you were a news station, there were standards of veracity that you had to meet. And there was a board that would actually evaluate them, including whether you were being fair to, both sides of a political issue. And I don't know if you remember when they used to have the contrary side would get a chance to give a rebuttal. That came from the Fairness Act. Okay, they let that expire. Okay, so that's why Fox News can say whatever they want. But when there was a Fairness Act, they couldn't. That's the kind of protection we need to be putting in place to protect the reality testing of our nation. In a nation that cannot see reality, that can be brainwashed, that cannot evaluate evidence, cannot know the difference between truth and untruth, that is a nation where democracy cannot survive.
And that, by the way, the Republicans, I believe, are aware of this. They know what is fake and what is real, but they are using this. So when someone like you, an expert psychologist, says that we need to regulate social media, they hear in their minds, well, there's the left trying to control our freedom of speech and take away our First Amendment rights. And so I believe there has to be some sort of, there's almost like a good authoritarian needs to come in and just squash.
Right. It's like, right. Well, it's like if you were with a bunch of kids and they were all beating each other up, you want an adult to come in the room and say, "Okay, guys, knock it off." Or if one kid is abusing another, to punish that kid. Yeah. So the thing is that Republicans abuse power, Democrats fail to use it. Okay,
wow, so that's a great quote.
So right, we don't have the votes right now to pass a law regulating social media, right? Because of the filibuster. Okay, so if we win the Senate, maybe we can. But we do control the executive branch. Yeah. What about some executive orders that would hit at these misinformation, kind of things? In other words, use whatever power you have. This is a bar fight. Pick up a bottle. If that's the only thing you got, pick it up.
I know.
And swing it.
Even I'll say the executive orders, actually, the one problem with the executive orders is the Supreme Court has something called the power of judicial review, where they can take any executive order and deem it unconstitutional and enforce.
Make them do it. Make them do it.
Oh, make them do it.
Make them do it. Pass the executive order and then make them knock it down. See, and then the Democrats, well, we can't make that executive order because the Supreme Court will knock it down. It's like, you know, you're thinking too many moves ahead. But in the sense, you're not thinking too many moves ahead. Take a strong position, right?
Yeah.
Show the people that you're taking a strong position for things that they believe in. Okay?
Right.
And that you're ready to fight for them. And if you lose the fight, okay, but they know which side you're on.
Yeah. And you know, these people, they need to be spanked back into reality. There's no easy, there's no partisanship here. This is, you got to just bulldoze it. So I guess that'll just tie me back into, you know, if you say we come from this sort of aggression is innate within us, or perhaps in some of us, is the only solution to all of this is at the ballot box, because we don't resort to violence. But the only solution to all of this deprogramming and this psychological warfare is just outnumber them through votes, which to me is scary, but it's the only way to do it.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, but it is really do or die, because it isn't like, you know, better luck next year. It's more like one strike and you're out, okay? Which really isn't fair, okay? But once they get control, I mean, it's very frightening that now this new group of Republicans who don't have the charisma, as you say, but they're following the playbook and they're working together, okay? And the point is, these election deniers who are running for governor and secretary of state in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, all the swing states, all of the swing states, okay, people whose basically their platform is, I will never let a Republican lose an election again, vote for me.
Yes. Just lies.
Well, I mean, and it was like the guy who's running for secretary of state in Arizona, I'm blocking on his name now, he's a former oath keeper.
Blake Masters, is that right?
Well, Blake Masters is the one running for Senate, but but Secretary of State is the guy who actually controls the elections.
That's right.
That's his job. And I'm sorry, I'm blocking his name, but he was a former oath keeper. And he was at the Capitol in 1-6. And before the election, he said, I will never concede. You know, we will not accept losing this election. So he announced in advance that if he loses, he will fight it. Okay, even before the votes were cast. These are the kind of people that want to control the elections. If this guy gets control of the elections in Arizona,
done.
It's over.
We never win there.
You'll never have another chance. You'll never get a second chance to vote.
Right. Well, that paints a grim picture, but it's the reality too, and we need to face it head on.
We need to face it head on. Absolutely. We need to know. The duty to warn is warn people so they know what the risk is, so they can take protective action. And unfortunately, we almost need to have a straight, you know, an inside straight, because we can't lose any of these states. We can't let an election denier get any swing state under their control. If they even win one of the four, we're screwed.
We are. Now, we're just on the duty to warn, because that's your big account. That's that's how that's how I discovered you too. So the duty to warn applies to, you have why don't you explain it? You have a duty to warn. Yeah, go for it here, because I think that was
the term actually began with a case in 1975 where someone told their psychologist he was planning on killing his girlfriend or thinking about killing his girlfriend. And the psychologist said nothing because of confidentiality. He went and killed his girlfriend. They sued him. That was the Tarasoff case. And therefore, it became not only in our ethics, but actually in the law. In all 50 states, we have a duty to warn a potential victim of violence if we become aware of it. If a patient confesses to us that they're thinking of hurting someone, confidentiality, literally, which is really one of our highest ethical values, confidentiality, absolutely goes out the window. Forget about it, right? Call them right now and warn them. You know, call protective services if you think a child is being abused or even suspect that they might be abused. So this protective function, this duty to warn, really takes primacy over all other ethical demands in our field. And my logic is, if I have a duty to warn one potential victim, what about 300 million potential victims? Don't I have a duty to warn them? Because no, it wasn't something Donald Trump confessed to me in a therapy session, but it's because I'm a psychologist and I realize this is the exact configuration of evil. This is malignant narcissism. Yeah. This is what Eric Fromm was talking about. This is a Hitler-like figure, you know, you got to become the psychiatric Paul Revere, right?
Yeah, you got to squat. You got to tell people. And I think one of the most disturbing elements about all this is not that the Donald Trump exists or the Carrie Lakes or the Josh Hawleys, but it's the fact that there's such a massive body of regular Americans who are for it. They are pro-insurrection. They are pro-authoritarianism. They are pro-Russia. They are now pro-Saudi Arabia. They are just going along for the ride. And to me, there's no stopping them. Their psychology, they've completely surrendered all of their true self. Yeah. Which is
it's a little bit like the zombie apocalypse.
It is,
because actually I said this in the movie, and I felt a little like maybe I'm sort of going off a little bit too far, and then I read that actually Romero, who made Night of the Living Dead, meant it as a metaphor for societies that go insane when they're infected by a crazy idea, a race, like a Hitler idea or a MAGA idea, and then suddenly become rabid animals and turn on their neighbors and on their family. That was meant to be a metaphor for exactly what we're experiencing. So yeah, forget the zombies. We're not going to get the zombie vote.
They're done. We just got to hope there's more living people than zombies.
Exactly. We got to take control from the zombies and survive.
Yes. Oh, John. Well, I think I've had enough doom and fear for today. No, but I appreciate you coming on and letting all of us know about getting I guess a peel inside the mind of the Trumpism as a disease, and perhaps there's a way out. But there's only one way out, guys, and you know what that is? It's getting out and vote. Yeah,
right.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was good talking to you. Sorry, I put you in a bad mood.
Oh, no,
I do that to people. I'm joking. I'm just joking. A lot of the interviews I do, people always say, I'm more scared and frightened now than I was before I started interviewing you. That's sort of like my job. Psychologists usually make people less anxious, you see. In this case, I'm doing
in a post-Trump world, everything is upside down.
There you go.
All right, John, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good talking to you.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the show. Help spread the word about uncovering the truth by giving us a 5-star review and sharing the show with a friend. We're available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and as always, I will continue to uncover the truth. The Uncovering the Truth theme song was created and produced by Pokari.